There was also a distance of 3 meters between the last guardroom and the entrance room at the end of the passageway. The man measured this room. It was from 4 meters from the doorway to the opposite wall, and the distance from the doorway to the wall on either side was 1 meter. The three guardrooms on each side of the passageway were the same size, and the walls that separated them were the same thickness. Next, the man measured the width of the passageway, and it was 6.5 meters, but the two doors of the gate were only 5 meters wide. In front of the guardrooms, which were 3 meters square, was a railing about 50 centimeters high and 50 centimeters thick. The man measured the distance from the back wall of one of these rooms to the same spot in the room directly across the passageway, and it was 12.5 meters. He measured the entrance room at the far end of the passageway, and it was 10 meters wide. Finally, he measured the total length of the passageway from the outer wall to the entrance room, and it was 25 meters. The three walls in the guardrooms had small windows in them, just like the ones in the entrance room. The walls along the passageway were decorated with carvings of palm trees. The outer courtyard. The man then led me through the passageway and into the outer courtyard of the temple, where I saw 30 rooms built around the outside of the courtyard. These side rooms were built against the outer wall, and in front of them was a pavement that circled the courtyard. This was known as the lower pavement, and it was 25 meters wide. I saw the gates that led to the inner courtyard of the temple and noticed that they were higher than those leading to the outer courtyard. The man measured the distance between the outer and inner gates, and it was 50 meters. The north gate. Next, the man measured the north gate that led to the outer courtyard. This gate also had 3 guardrooms on each side of a passageway. The measurements of these rooms, the walls between them, and the entrance room at the far end of the passageway were exactly the same as those of the east gate. The north gate was also 25 meters long and 12.5 meters wide, and the windows, the entrance room, and the carvings of palm trees were just like those in the east gate. The entrance room also faced the courtyard of the temple and had 7 steps leading up to it. Directly across the outer courtyard was a gate that led to the inner courtyard, just as there was for the east gate. The man measured the distance between the outer and inner gate, and it was 50 meters. The south gate. The man then took me to the south gate. He measured the walls and the entrance room of this gate, and the measurements were exactly the same as those of the other 2 gates. There were windows in the guardrooms of this gate and in the entrance room, just like the others, and this gate was also 25 meters long and 12.5 meters wide. 7 steps led up to the gate. The entrance room was at the far end of the passageway and faced the courtyard of the temple. Carvings of palm trees decorated the walls along the passageway. And directly across the outer courtyard was a gate on the south side of the inner courtyard. The man measured the distance between the outer and inner gate, and it was also 50 meters. The gate leading to the inner courtyard. We then went into the inner courtyard through the gate on the south side of the temple. The man measured the gate, and it was the same size as the gates in the outer wall. In fact, everything along the passageway was also the same size, including the guardrooms, the walls separating them, the entrance room at the far end, and the windows. This gate, like the others, was 25 meters long and 12.5 meters wide. The entrance room of this gate faced the outer courtyard, and carvings of palm trees decorated the walls of the passageway. 8 steps led up to this gate. Next, we went through the east gate to the inner courtyard. The man measured this gate, and it was the same size as the others. The guardrooms, the walls separating them, and its entrance room had the same measurements as the other gates. The guardrooms and the entrance room had windows, and the gate was 25 meters long and 12.5 meters wide. The entrance room faced the outer courtyard, and the walls in the passageway were decorated with carvings of palm trees. 8 steps also led up to this gate. Then the man took me to the north gate. He measured it, and it was the same size as the others, including the guardrooms, the walls separating them, and the entrance room. There were also windows in this gate. It was 25 meters long and 12.5 meters wide, and like the other inner gates, its entrance room faced the outer courtyard, and its walls were decorated with carvings of palm trees. 8 steps also led up to this gate. The rooms for sacrificing animals. Inside the entrance room of the north gate, I saw 4 tables, 2 on each side of the room, where the animals to be sacrificed were killed. Just outside this room was a small building used for washing the animals before they were offered as sacrifices to please the Lord, or sacrifices for sin, or sacrifices to make things right. 4 more tables were in the outer courtyard, 2 on each side of the steps leading into the entrance room. So there was a total of 8 tables, 4 inside and 4 outside, where the animals were killed, and where the meat was placed until it was sacrificed on the altar. Next to the tables in the entrance room were 4 stone tables, 50 centimeters high and 75 centimeters square. The equipment used for killing the animals was kept on top of these tables. All around the walls of this room was a 75 millimeter shelf. The rooms belonging to the priests. The room then took me to the inner courtyard, where I saw 2 buildings, one side the inner gate on the north and the other beside the inner gate on the south. He said, the buildings beside the north gate belongs to the priests who serve in the temple, and the building beside the south gate belongs to those who serve at the altar. All of them are descendants of Zadok and are the only Levites allowed to serve as the Lord's priests. The inner courtyard and the temple. Now the man measured the inner courtyard. It was 50 meters square. I also saw an altar in front of the temple. We walked to the porch of the temple, and the man measured the doorway of the porch. It was 7 meters long, 2.5 meters wide, and the distance from the doorway to the wall on either side was 1.5 meters. The porch itself was 10 meters by 6 meters with steps leading up to it. There was a column on each side of these steps. Chapter 41. Next, we went into the main room of the temple. The man measured the doorway of this room. It was 3 meters wide, 5 meters long, and the distance from the doorway to the wall on either side was 2.5 meters. The main room itself was 20 meters by 10 meters. Then the man walked to the far end of the temple's main room and said, beyond this doorway is the most holy place. He first measured the doorway. It was 1 meter wide, 3 meters long, and the distance from the doorway to the wall on either side was 3.5 meters. Then he measured the most holy place, and it was 10 meters square. The storage rooms of the temple. The man measured the wall of the temple, and it was 3 meters thick. Storage rooms 2 meters wide were built against the outside of the wall. There were 3 levels of rooms with 30 rooms on each level, and they rested on ledges that were attached to the temple walls, so that nothing was built into the walls. The walls of the temple were thicker at the bottom than at the top, which meant that the storage rooms on the top level were wider than those on the bottom level. Steps led from the bottom level through the middle level and into the top level. The temple rested on a stone base 3 meters high, which also served as the foundation for the storage rooms. The outside walls of the storage rooms were 2.5 meters thick. There was nothing between these walls and the nearest buildings 10 meters away. One door led into the storage rooms on the north side of the temple, and another door led to those on the south side. The stone base extended 2.5 meters beyond the outside wall of the storage rooms. the west building and the measurements of the temple. I noticed another building. It faced the west end of the temple and was 35 meters wide, 45 meters long, and had walls over 2.5 meters thick. The man measured the length of the temple, and it was 50 meters. He then measured from the back wall of the temple across the open space behind the temple to the back wall of the west building. It was 50 meters. The distance across the front of the temple, including the open space on either side, was also 50 meters. Finally, the man measured the length of the west building, including the side rooms on each end, and it was also 50 meters. The inside of the temple, the inside walls of the temple's porch and main room were paneled with wood all the way from the floor to the windows, while the doorways, the small windows, and the 3 side rooms were trimmed in wood. The paneling stopped just above the doorway. These walls were decorated with carvings of winged creatures and had a carving of a palm tree between the creatures. Each winged creature had 2 faces, a human face looking at the palm tree on one side and a lion's face looking at the palm tree on the other side. These designs were carved into the paneling all the way around the 2 rooms. The door frame to the temple's main room was in the shape of a rectangle, the wooden altar. In front of the doorway to the most holy place was something that looked like a wooden altar. It was 1.5 meters high and 1 meter square, and its corners, its base, and its sides were made of wood. The man said, "This is a reminder that the Lord is constantly watching over his temple." The doors in the temple, both the doorway to the main room of the temple and the doorway to the most holy place, had 2 doors, and each door and 2 sections that could fold open. The doors to the main room were decorated with carvings of winged creatures and palm trees just like those on the walls, and there was a wooden covering over the porch just outside these doors. The walls on each side of this porch had small windows and were also decorated with carvings of palm trees. Chapter 42, the sacred rooms for the priests. After the man and I left the temple and walked back to the outer courtyard, he showed me a set of rooms on the north side of the west building. This set of rooms was 50 meters long and 25 meters wide. On one side of them was the 10 meters of open space that ran beside the temple, and on the other side was the pavement that circled the outer courtyard. The rooms were arranged in 3 levels with doors that opened towards the north, and in front of them was a passage 5 meters wide and 50 meters long. The rooms on the top level were narrower than those on the middle level, and the rooms on the middle level were narrower than those on the bottom level. The rooms on the bottom level supported those on the 2 upper levels, and so these rooms did not have columns like other buildings in the courtyard. To the north was a screening wall 25 meters long, and at the east end of this wall was the door leading from the courtyard to these rooms. There was also a set of rooms on the south side of the west building. These rooms were exactly like those on the north side, and they also had a passage in front of them. The door to these rooms was at the east end of the wall that stood in front of them. The man then said to me, "These rooms on the north and south sides of the temple are the sacred rooms where the Lord's priests will eat the most holy offerings. These offerings include the grain sacrifices, the sacrifices for sin, and the sacrifices to make things right. When the priests are ready to leave the temple, they must go through these rooms before they return to the outer courtyard. They must leave their sacred clothes in these rooms and put on ordinary clothes before going anywhere near other people." The size of the temple area. After the man had finished measuring the buildings inside the temple area, he took me back through the east gate and measured the wall around this area. He used his measuring stick to measure the east side of this wall. It was 255 meters long. Then he measured the north side. the south side, and the west side of the wall, and they were each 255 meters long, and so the temple area was a perfect square. The wall around this area separated what was sacred from what was ordinary. Chapter 43. The Lord's glory returns to the temple. The man took me to the east gate of the temple, where I saw the brightness of the glory of Israel's God coming from the east. The sound I heard was as loud as ocean waves, and everything around was shining with the dazzling brightness of His glory. This vision was like the one I had seen when God came to destroy Jerusalem, and like the one I had seen near the river Kebar. I immediately bowed with my face to the ground, and the Lord's glory came through the east gate and into the temple. The Lord's Spirit lifted me to my feet and carried me to the inner courtyard, where I saw that the Lord's glory had filled the temple. The man was standing beside me, and I heard the Lord say from inside the temple, Ezekiel, son of man, this temple is my throne on earth. I will live here among the people of Israel forever. They and their kings will never again disgrace me by worshipping idols at local shrines or by setting up memorials to their dead kings. Israel's kings built their palaces so close to my holy temple that only a wall separated them from me. Then these kings disgraced me with their evil ways, and in my fierce anger I destroyed them. But if the people and their kings stop worshipping other gods and tear down those memorials, I will live among them forever. The people of Israel must suffer shame for sinning against me. So tell them about my holy temple. Let them think about it. Then, if they are truly sorry, describe for them the design and shape of the temple, the gates, the measurements, and how the buildings are arranged. Explain the regulations about worshiping there, then write down these things so they can study and obey them. The temple area on my holy mountain must be kept sacred. This is the most important law about the temple. The altar. According to the official standards, the altar in the temple had the following measurements. Around the bottom of the altar was gutter 50 centimeters wide and 50 centimeters deep, with a 25 centimeter ledge on the outer rim. The altar rested on a base and had three sections, each one of them square. The bottom section was 8 meters on each side and 1 meter high. The middle section was 7 meters on each side and 2 meters high, and it had a 25 centimeter rim around its outer edge. The top section, which was 6 meters on each side and 2 meters high, was the place where sacrifices were burnt, and the four corners of the top section looked like the horns of a bull. The steps leading up to the altar were on the east side. The dedication of the altar. The Lord God said, Ezekiel, son of man, after the altar is built, it must be dedicated by offering sacrifices on it and by splattering it with blood. Here is what you must do. The priests of the Levi tribe from the family of Zadok, the priests, are the only ones who may serve in my temple. This is my law. So give them a young bull to slaughter as a sacrifice for sin. Take some of the animal's blood and smear it on the four corners of the altar, some on the corners of the middle section, and some more on the rim around its edge. That will purify the altar and make it fit for offering sacrifices to me. Then take the body of the bull outside the temple area and burn it at the special place. The next day, a goat that has nothing wrong with it must be offered as a sacrifice for sin. Purify the altar with its blood, just as you did with the blood of the bull. Then choose a young bull and a young ram that have nothing wrong with them, and bring them to my temple. The priests will sprinkle salt on them and offer them as sacrifices to please me. Each day for the next 7 days you must offer a goat and a bull and a ram as sacrifices for sin. These animals must have nothing wrong with them. The priests will purify the altar during those days, so that it will be acceptable to me and ready to use. From then on, the priests will use this altar to offer sacrifices to please me and sacrifices to ask my blessing. Then I will be pleased with the people of Israel. I, the Lord God, have spoken.